Hello, hello, hello. I am JaiDei Jackson from You Are Worthy, and I have my lovely co host here, Dr. Natasha Lamar of The Wise Inc. And today's topic is about being the emotional anchor for your husband. I had someone send me an email, and her question to me was, why am I responsible for helping my husband process his emotions? Why can't he figure out his own emotions? Why am I the one that's having to handle the or carry the emotional burden in this marriage? And I thought, that's a very good question. So, what are your thoughts about that, Dr. Lamar, before we even jump into it and I give you what I think?
First of all, that can be very exhausting, and a lot of couples where one partner, because it could be the other partner being responsible or attempting to be responsible for their partner's emotions. I think it is the recipe to a dead end. No one can be responsible for their partner's emotion. Now, can you support them? Absolutely. But it's so important to make sure that you all understand the importance of managing and modulating your own emotions and how you allow them or how you regulate them. And I just did a video or a TikTok the other day, and I was talking about power in a relationship. And oftentimes, when you are responsible or made to feel as if you are responsible, it shifts the power in the relationship. And a relationship should be about partnerhood and not about power, right? Because you're two equal partners attempting to achieve whatever goals you all have set out. So no, I think it's very detrimental to a relationship when someone is assuming the responsibility or being the anchor of someone's emotion. So that was a really good question, but those are my 2 cents.
Okay, well, I like that. And you're right. That's what she was complaining about. She's like, it's exhausting. It's exhausting because I have to deal with my own emotional state and then I got to help him process his emotional state. And one of the things that I think we have to take into consideration is that in society, there is no space, for the most part, for men to be able to process
Mm.
a lot of emotions outside of anger. That emotion, even though it's anger, an angry man is scary to us, but that's an emotion that we give, that we allow men to have. But the rest of them hurt. So I see you want to say something. Go ahead.
I
I'm not
want
saying
to
that they don't have the capacity. I'm just saying when you think about it, we don't like, and I'm speaking in generalities here. There's this thing about a soft man or a weepy man or an emotional man. And most people feel that when a man um, is expressing too much emotions, they feel that that's not a safe man. Like, because men don't trust emotions, they trust facts. Well,
I
go ahead.
love it. I love it, and I agree. But my something in me is saying is that specifics for certain cultures, right? Because there are community of men that have no issue with crying, no issue with speaking how they feel and to express emotions other
Well,
than
I get a
anger.
norm. That's what I'm speaking about now, the norm. Because you're right. There are men who are emotional. My husband is one of those individuals who is an emotional person. Even though he's emotional, he doesn't always process his emotions.
Got it.
And that's a gift that I have. And I don't know if it's because I'm a therapist or if that gift, like what came first, the chicken or the hen. No, the egg or the hen. But what I recognize is I'm able to help him process his emotions. Now, I like what you said. I'm not responsible for that. I didn't, but it was a gift that I came. It's a capacity that I have. Like I seek to understand. So that's one of my gifts that I bring. And I like to believe that's one of the things that makes me a good therapist. However, it's something that I recognize about myself. So when I go forth and I'm interacting with people, and even with my husband, I'm standing in this place of, can I carry it? But I need to make sure I got what I need to be able um, to deal with some of this other stuff, which isn't mine.
Right.
But I'm looking at, because we came together as husband and wife, then I'm saying there are going to be some things that I'm going to have to help him process. I'm going to have to help him see some things. Now, that's my stance. And I think that when I work with couples, that's what I hear them. That's a complaint of theirs, that why do I have to? Why can't he? Versus, what if it's the training? As women, we are given the opportunities to stand in our emotions and express our feelings all the time. We're encouraged to do that even as little children. But when we're raising boys, what do we tell them? And there's a lot of research out here about this as well. When we're raising little boys, what do we tell them to do after a certain age? Big boys don't cry. When we're talking to little kids,
And that's the point that I'm making. You made three. I mean, there's three different things I want to hit on. So I do agree. I do believe that, and I think it goes both ways. I think there are times when um, one partner has to help process the emotion of the other partner, and then there's other times when the other partner will do it. But there's no responsibility. You don't have to. You're not required to manage and regulate the emotions of someone else. Actually, I think it's impossible. And I think when we try to pick up that task, it makes us and our ability as an individual to show up much, much harder. But I want to go back to the comment about what we teach little boys. And this is going to be a little sticky, but I don't believe that all communities teach little boys that it's not okay to cry, right? The same way, and I don't know all African Americans, but from my experience is I hear that a lot in the African American community. Even certain things, if a boy do something, oh, don't do that because that's girls do that, or don't wear pink because girls do that. But then there's other communities where it's embraced. Like even if a little boy wants to paint his nails, it's like he got a sister. It's like she painted her nails, so he painted his nails, and they don't exchange that as some inappropriate sexual act.
I'm going to bring you back because I want to stay on this topic of being the emotional anchor for the husband in the relationship. Because I get what you're saying, and I think that's another topic for another day. When we're looking at, and you were going, I like the point that you were beginning to make about it's not someone's responsibility to take on the emotional processing of the other person. But what about helping them?
Yeah. So let me say this, ma'am. But I was going to, because you were saying how we process emotions. So ultimately, we were talking about the ability to process emotions, and I feel like in certain in certain communities, and it's not just the African American, right? In Hispanic communities, where there is this male female role that is encouraged and oftentimes created from the dominant culture view. But it goes back to certain communities have a difficult time when it comes to marriage because they never learned how to actually express their emotions, and because they never learned how to express their emotions, the other partner on the other end is oftentimes caught in between a rock and a hard space with having or feeling responsible for their partner's emotions. And if I say this, then he'll feel this way, or if I say this, then she'll feel this way, when that is not it. And so what that means is a person has married or connected their wagon to someone with low EQ. But the point that I'm making is a person should never be responsible for someone else's emotional issues. Helping, absolutely. Providing support, absolutely. And again, it should go both ways. One person shouldn't be responsible because, again, it goes back to that power. And whoever's doing most of the work is the person with the power. And when you have all the power, that means someone else have very minimal or limited power, then it's not a relationship. It's not a partnership. It's actually a parenthood or an authoritarian relationship, which isn't very sustainable.
So then what I'm looking at is, if I know that, so let's just take a, for instance, if you recognize that your spouse is upset about something. Mm-hmm. So are you going to just wait for them to process it and figure it out on their own? Or would you step in and help them? Like, you seem to be upset. Is there something bothering you? Or would you just in general, like, what would you do? Would you leave them over there and be the grumpy bear? Or would you go, you seem to be upset today. Is something bothering you? Do you want to talk about it?
So I want to be as honest as possible. And I know people are watching this. And I feel like sometimes when people watch videos like this, they take on what the person is saying and not the makeup of the relationship. So because of the relationship that my husband and I have, I'm gonna ask. And if I get pushback, then I'm gonna back away because I know that he need more time to process. But I also want to share this TMI. I'm not a grudge holder, and my husband isn't a grudge holder. So neither neither of us tend to stay upset or sit in our stuff for long periods of time before we saying how we feel. And I think that's just a part of who we are, right? Innately who we are. So it really depends on the situation. There's been times when I knew he was upset by no fault of mine, and I had to give him some space. Like I had to back up and give him some space. And it took him coming back around and talking about it, right? And so I think it really just depends on the relationship. I think it depends on the individual. And I think it depends on knowing your partner's capacity to process. Now, if you have a partner and you know that that person doesn't process and you're asking questions, it's not going to help it if that's not the way that they process. Now, if you understand this and they've given you permission that when they go into this hole, that they want you to help pull them out, then that's a different thing. But it's really about understanding and knowing the relationship and how it works. So that's just kind of my thoughts as it relates to that.
I like what you said. There are two things that you said: knowing your partner. The other thing that I want to speak on is pulling someone out of it, because
Okay.
I know that's not really what I'm talking about, pulling someone out of it. However, I think, as you said, when you know your partner, then you can tell that something is upsetting to them, or they are distressed in some kind of way, and be in a space, because that's all it is being a
Yeah.
safe, from my perspective, being a safe space for them to be able to come to you and to talk, or you to even go to them and talk about what's upsetting them, even if they're not in touch with what's
Right.
upsetting them. And that's when I think of an anchor, I think of something that's stabilizing,
Right.
like
Ooh,
it allows it to be maintained. Like
right.
a anchor really holds something in place, but
Right.
I'm looking at it as a stabilizing force. And that is that something that we can provide for our spouse in terms of, when I think about who we are as women, and then who men are, and this is speaking broadly, that I have the capacity to process emotions more deeply than my spouse may. It doesn't mean that he can't feel his emotions, but I think I can help him process his emotions a little more, or tap into them, and not be afraid, or whatever it is that keeps him from actually speaking on them.
Right.
What are your thoughts about that?
So this is the kicker. You said something that was very powerful. If you're extending your hand, then you're not pulling. You're giving him the opportunity to join. When you're pulling, there's actual a force that you're doing. No, I don't think that should happen. I think you should represent it. You could represent that anchor and extend the hand. But if he's not willing to attach, then you have to back away, because then it becomes this power play. So I do believe that we can be an anchor, but I don't think we should force and or pull. But it goes back to knowing you and knowing your partner and understanding the dynamics of the relationship, right? So those are just my thoughts.
Yeah, and I absolutely agree with you. Knowing yourself, knowing your partner. And I like that. Like when your hand is open or you're reaching, if I'm reaching, that person needs to extend back and reach back, and there needs to be a grasping. And I think that that's something that needs to be worked out at some point in time, to understand who we are. Because you're right, at the end of the day, you will be exhausted. And that's in any relationship, not just with your husband, but right now we are talking about husbands. And so if you are overextending yourself, if you are pulling, in other words, forcing them to talk, because men process their emotions entirely differently than we do. And it's not even a men, people. I don't process outwardly. I tend to think and go within, and then when I'm ready to talk about it, then I talk about it. But I have some friends who process their emotions outwardly. They like to talk about where they are, and to understand that. And so, in knowing that, you need to know that about yourself, and you need to know that about your partner. Because if your
Absolutely.
partner is one of those individuals that need to go within, and you're one of those individuals that like to talk about it, then you can be overstepping.
Right.
And you can also be infringing upon their space and their privacy and
Right.
their process. I think that that's when we need to have an agreement. Like, can we talk about what's going on when you have processed it? What do you
Right.
think about all of that?
Right. Okay. Yes. Here I come. Absolutely right. I agree.
Okay. So I want you to be mindful when you're engaging with your spouse to know that he's responsible for his emotional body, but you can provide the support. You
Right.
can provide, you can be a safe space, but it's an agreement and an understanding between you and him
Right.
or you and her, because
Right.
in this case it's the same thing. It's a commitment, but you
Absolutely.
definitely need to understand what your partner needs to feel safe, to be able to talk with you. Do they need to process before they can come to you? Or are they a talker? Do they talk outwardly?
Right.
At the end of the day, they are the ones who are responsible for their emotional body. And if they don't
Absolutely.
know how to get in contact with their emotional body, that's what therapy is for.